What's up? I'm Lex. Welcome to Feedback Audio. Today we are talking about microphones. Microphones are incredibly important, obviously, in the recording process because that's what you're using to record. And today we're going to talk about the different types of microphones, how they actually work, like what is happening inside of the microphone. We're not going to get too technical, but basic ideas of what's going on with them and how to apply these microphones and types of microphones to the sources that you are recording. All right, the first one that we're going to get into is the standard that you're probably going to be seeing in most studios, including your own home studio, and that is a condenser microphone. We're going to start by talking about large diaphragm condenser mics, and we're going to go through everything that you need to know about those. Okay? So, a perfect example of a large diaphragm condenser is something that looks like this. These are pretty standard looking microphones. This is an Audio-Technica 4033A. This is honestly a great microphone, and it's not too expensive. This is one that, like, if you were looking to upgrade into your like second tier, third tier of mic, this is a great place to start. I've used this on tons of different vocalists, including Matthew Mozingo, and we love the way that it sounds. It is an awesome, awesome workhorse of a microphone. So, this is a large diaphragm condenser. It's a little hard to see, but if you're able to get one in your hand, you can look if you hold it up to the light and you can see the capsule inside of the microphone. So basically what you've got is a capsule that's suspended inside of this grate. The grate is just here to protect the capsule. Now, the way these microphones work is you've got your capsule, which has a diaphragm, which is a thin plate of metal, right? Super thin. That's adjacent from a back plate. Okay. So you've got those two kind of right next to each other. When you sing into a microphone, play an instrument, anything like that, you are changing the sound pressure in front of you, right? So if you're even when I'm talking, I can hold my hand in front of my mouth and I can feel the air coming out of my mouth and hitting my hand, okay? Same thing that's going to happen in a microphone. When I start talking into a microphone, I am changing the sound pressure level here, okay? Vibrations are coming through the air and they're going to hit that diaphragm. Now, that diaphragm is going to move subtly in variation against the back plate, and then you have that variable capacitor is created, and that's going to send signal down through the XLR cable all the way to your interface and get converted into audio that you can see and hear on your computer. Okay, so that's how it works. You've got a diaphragm on a back plate and it's moving like this, and that's going to generate the electrical signal to send out and get recorded. So, large diaphragm condensers are fantastic for all kinds of things, but the main thing that they get used for is vocals. You see it all the time, right? Now, there are tons of different types of large diaphragm condensers, but you're going to see these used on vocals. You can use them for acoustic guitar, acoustic piano, pretty much any source, electric guitar, overheads for drums, anything in the world, they're great microphones for. They are very sensitive, they do capture everything, right? So if you put this up in a room and you crank the gain, you're going to be able to hear everything. If you've got people in the room with you recording, like say you're in a session and you've got people on, you need everyone else in the room to be quiet because they'll get picked up in this. This is a very sensitive microphone. They all have different polar patterns. Usually condensers, just standard, if you're grabbing something that's going to have a cardioid polar pattern, but that's something we're going to talk about in a different video. Today we're just talking about how microphones work. This microphone is sick because it's got some things on the back that you can use. It's got a low cut, so if you wanted to do some kind of like pre-EQ to your vocal and cut out all those low rumbly frequencies, it has a preset low cut filter that you can turn on and off. It also has a pad, so you can have a 10 dB pad, so if you're recording something super loud like a snare drum or a screaming vocal, you could throw the pad on so that you won't get any clipping, and if you only have room for a little bit of gain in the computer. All right. So there are tons of different types of large diaphragm condenser microphones, and one of the types that you're going to run into is tube microphones. So this works exactly the same. This is the Avantone CV. It's a great microphone, looks super cool, but it also has just a nice warm low end with some nice sharp mids as well. So it's cool for vocals. It sounds really great, and acoustic guitar. These work the exact same way. So it's going to have that diaphragm on the back plate, exactly the same setup like that. This one has variable polar patterns. Again, we'll talk about that in a different video. But the main thing about tube microphones that is cool is it has a tube in it. So inside of this body, there is an actual vacuum tube set up in there, just like there would be for a guitar amp, right? So if you love the sound of warm tubes on a guitar signal, you like that breakup and that kind of grittiness that comes along with the saturation that comes along with setting the gain a little high, a tube condenser can be a great option. The thing that's going to be a little different with a tube condenser is the vibe and overall style that you're going to get. So with a regular condenser, you're going to get usually kind of clean, not necessarily sterile, but you're going to get that sharp, clean sound. You're still going to get that with a tube condenser, but it's going to be a little bit warmer, darker, muddier. Muddy is usually used as a bad thing, but it can be good depending on your source. Like if you've got a vocal of somebody who's got a low baritone voice, these can really, really, really smooth out those low ends and make them sound amazing and buttery. So just a different type of microphone here. Now, the bottom of this microphone does not accept stereotypical XLR cable. This is going to be a, I believe, 9 pin or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pin cable. There's some different ones out there, but it needs something different. It actually has a power supply. Let's talk about power with condenser microphones. So with a normal condenser microphone, again, like our AT4033A, this thing needs power. Any condenser microphone needs power. The way you get it to a standard microphone like this is phantom power, plus 48 volts. If you see that on your interface, plus 48 volts, you click that, that powers the microphone through the XLR cable and turns it on and makes it available for you to use. Now, with a tube condenser mic, they often come with a power supply. Now, the power supply basically just does that. It powers the microphone, but sometimes it can do some different things like this one. So this, you have a mic in, which is where you run your microphone cable. This is a 7 pin cable from the mic to the box, the power supply, and then you run out XLR to your interface, okay? This also has selectable polar patterns, which is an awesome thing that you can use. Again, we're going to talk about polar patterns later, but your condenser microphones need power. So you're either using plus 48 volts or you're using a power supply like this. If you buy a new microphone from the store and you plug it in and it doesn't work, it's on you now because you didn't turn on 48 volts. Make sure you turn that on so that you can have power to your microphone and you can hear everything. All right? The next type of microphone that we are going to get into is small diaphragm condensers. This is the same thing as a condenser, right? Except they're very small. These things are awesome. They're super convenient because of their size. You can travel with a lot of them. You can easily throw a couple in a case and put it in your backpack, and you can have microphones on the go. These are typically used for acoustic guitar, piano, drum overheads, but not necessarily vocals. Now, could you record vocals with this? Of course. You can always record vocals with anything, but this is not one of those things that you are going to want to use for vocals right away, because if you stick this in front of your mouth like this diaphragm is very, very small, and so it is very sensitive. And if you blow a bunch of air, say you go with a plosive and send a bunch of air into this without a pop filter, you can actually damage these microphones very, very easily. The cool thing about these, which people sometimes call pencil condensers, is they're still cardioid. Sometimes you can get them hypercardioid and different things like that, but they're a little more directional. And again, you can squeeze them into small spaces. So if you're working around a drum kit, like a hi-hat mic or an under hi-hat mic, this can be really, really great option. They're convenient and they're awesome. Again, this has a filter that you can add on and a 15 dB pad. This is the Beyerdynamic MC930. I love these things because usually pencil condensers are pretty bright in sound and don't really use or get as much of those warm low end feel that a normal large diaphragm condenser microphone can. But these are fantastic, these Beyerdynamic MC930s, because they are warm and dark while still having that nice shimmery bright end, but without it being too bitey. So this on an acoustic guitar, fantastic natural sounding thing. All right, the next microphone type that we're going to talk about is dynamic mics. Dynamic mics are sick. They can be used for all kinds of things, obviously, just like any microphone, but you typically find them on loud sources, kick drums, snare drum, electric guitars, room mics, anything like that. Now, obviously, you could use them to record vocals. They usually get used for like screaming vocals or a heavy hip hop vocal or something like that, and they work really, really well for that. The way that these work, first of all, SM57, greatest microphone in the world. It's cheap, it's effective, you can throw it around, and it's always going to survive. You could literally toss this down the stairs. Anytime my kids want to play with a microphone, they get an SM57. They are super, super durable, and they work great. You're going to see these in live venues all over the place, in recording studios all over the place. Let's talk about how it works. So, a dynamic microphone works a little bit different. It still has a diaphragm inside, right? So you still have that thin metal piece, that membrane, that's going to be the diaphragm that moves with sound pressure. But the way it works in here in a dynamic microphone is there's a voice coil, which is again like a little coil that's attached to the diaphragm. When you talk into the microphone, you're going to change the sound pressure level, create vibrations. They're going to hit the diaphragm, and that whole diaphragm and coil are going to move back and forth to create that electric current that sends down through the XLR and into your computer, into your interface. Okay. This works on the principle of electromagnetic induction. That's the idea. Okay. So you're moving that coil back and forth. And that is why these can take on a lot more sound pressure level, aka loud signal. Okay. So you can stick this thing inside of a kick drum, and all that air is going to go flying past the diaphragm, and it's not going to damage the microphone like it might a different type of microphone, like a small diaphragm condenser. But these things can take on loud, loud sounds, and that's how they work. Again, it's that little coil and diaphragm moving like this and creating that signal that's going to send it out. Now, these microphones get used a lot for different things. You're also going to see a different type of dynamic microphone, still a dynamic mic, but this is the UA SD1. It's the same as like a Shure SM7B, a classic style microphone, right? They have that look to it and all that. Now, this microphone is used commonly for vocals. You're going to see these things all over the place, especially in home studios or podcast studios, as the vocal mic. And that is because dynamic microphones have this really nice effect to them that people use to make their voices sound really smooth and buttery. And it's called proximity effect. Proximity effect with a dynamic microphone means the closer that you are to the microphone, the deeper and darker the sound gets, right? So it gets more low end the closer that you get, and less low end the further away that you are. That makes it very, very powerful. Now, condensers don't have this effect. They don't work that way. Now, the sound might be a little thinner if you're further away, sure, but it's not like proximity effect. So, this can be great. If you put a microphone like this, a dynamic mic like this, on a bass cab when you're recording it, like a bass guitar big cab, you can get some beautiful low end tones because you have this pressed right up to the speaker. If you pull it away from the speaker, you're going to have less and less of that low end. So if you're doing vocals and you're a podcaster, you might have the microphone right here, and that's going to give that silky, low end, boomy, kind of warm sound that we all love from a podcast, right? But if you're talking all the way out here, you're going to have more of that kind of thinner, normal sounding recorded vocal. So here's one of the problems with dynamic mics. A lot of people end up buying them for their home studio because they're great for recording vocals at home, which is awesome. That's not the problem. The problem is everybody does this and they put their mouth over top of the microphone and they talk, and that makes it hard for your engineer because all you're doing is pulling out low end and not really doing anything beneficial to the vocal in mixing. But if you give yourself some space, right? Give yourself kind of like a fist worth of space, and you hold it away from your mouth and sing into it, you're going to get a nice, natural sounding vocal. And that's what you're looking for. Great mics to have at home, especially if you're in like a loud environment, like if you've got street noise by your house or the AC unit runs really loud or something like that. You can go with something like this because what is right in front of it is going to be a little bit more recorded. Now, not like a condenser where you have, if Duck is sitting across the room and I'm talking with the microphone this close to me, it's not going to be picking up a lot of Duck. But if we have a condenser microphone in the room between us, you're going to hear both of us in there, and that's the biggest problem. So these are great for recording at home, and you can use proximity effect to benefit you. Me personally, I have like a pretty thin voice, especially when I'm rapping or singing. It's very thin and mid-range heavy. So I like using one of these because it kind of warms my vocal up a little bit and makes it feel more natural. But you got to figure out if it works for you. Now, if you've got a low baritone voice, I don't know if this is going to be your best mic because it might overdo the low end, okay? Especially with proximity effect. So make sure you pull that microphone away from the source a little bit to get that more natural sound. All right? I think that brings us to the end of dynamic mics. They are awesome, super helpful, and you can use them to record entire albums. Like, if you could only buy one microphone in the entire world, I highly recommend the SM57. You can do anything with this thing. You can do vocals, acoustic guitar, get yourself a little cloud lifter on the way in, and that is really, really going to make this microphone sound fantastic. All right, the last type of microphone that we're going to talk about, which are the coolest mics in my opinion ever, are ribbon microphones, kind of like this. This is the Cascade Fathead 2. I love this thing. It looks so sick and also sounds amazing. Now, ribbon microphones are a little different. They are technically a type of dynamic microphone, right? They work off of the same idea, that electromagnetic induction, right? But they happen in a different way. If you look inside of a ribbon microphone, you're going to see basically what is a magnet with a little tiny strip of corrugated metal hovering in between the magnet, right? So it is suspended. These are very, very sensitive microphones. I cannot stress that enough. If you drop a ribbon microphone and that little piece of metal, the corrugated metal, falls out of place, you're cooked. Now, they can be fixed, all that kind of stuff, but they're very, very sensitive. So take your time with them. Do not drop them. You shouldn't drop any microphone if you could help it, except for the SM57. Go ahead. But this one, try not to drop. These are very, very delicate. So, the way these things work, basically what's happening is if I start speaking into the microphone, I have vibrations coming out of my mouth, the sound pressure level changes, it's going to hit that corrugated strip of metal, right? That metal is going to vibrate and create electrical signal that will go down through the XLR and into your interface. That's how it works. Now, these things are incredible for recording sounds that you want to be a little warmer. Perfect example, a trumpet. Super harsh, pretty brash, but a ribbon microphone will kind of smooth that out. It's going to have this like darker, warmer sound in general. These typically don't have a ton of bright high end. They're kind of like the opposite of a condenser in that way. A condenser can be really bright and sharp, and this is going to be the opposite, really dark and kind of low bassy vibes, right? So, a ribbon microphone in front of a trumpet is going to smooth out all that harshness and make it sound smooth and beautiful. Any horn, really. You could also put it out in front of a kick drum, maybe give it like 2 feet, and you're going to have a really nice, like low, slow, boomy kick drum. That's kind of what you want, right? Now, can you stick this in a kick drum? I would highly recommend you do not do that because although this can take on a lot of signal, if you put too much air at it at once, you can knock that piece of corrugated metal out from the magnet. So if you put it in a kick drum and you send all that air, it could knock that out and that could not be good. But if you want to put it in front of a guitar amp and send it, ribbon microphones are known for electric guitars. It's how you get that gritty, boomy, low, bass heavy guitars, right? That you can kind of shape later in your mix. But they are going to give you big, fat guitars when you're using a ribbon microphone. So that's a great way to do it. Here's something key to remember with a ribbon mic. Never, ever, ever, for any reason, should you send phantom power to a ribbon microphone. Can't happen because it will fry that piece of metal in the magnet and your microphone will no longer work. Now, some microphones, like some of the Cascade mics, have 48 volts blockers so that if it notices, hey, there's signal coming, that's 48 volts, it'll basically like turn off that signal and not allow it to go all the way up to the microphone. So 48 volts will fry your ribbon microphones. That's like the most common thing that happens when people don't know. They get their first ribbon mic and then they plug it into their interface that maybe has 48 volts on like all the channels and not just individually. And they'll be like, my microphone doesn't work. And it's like, well, you just fried it. That's just how it works. So you've got to be careful with these. Now, these microphones are awesome. You may not be using them on a vocal all the time, but as a secondary mic on a vocal and to blend in, they can be great. If you've got like maybe like a female jazz vocalist, this would be a great microphone for that. Maybe rap vocal, I don't know, because you need that sibilance and that hard enacted sound. but this I wouldn't really use for that. But you can use it for a lot of things. You can use it for acoustic guitar if you're going for like a darker, muddier sound. Drum overheads is really cool if you want dark, washy cymbals and things like that. I've also used these as room mics for drums a ton, and you can really crush them in the mix later and they sound awesome. So, ribbon microphones are super cool. This is usually something that people get into later. It's not going to be the first microphone that you buy, a ribbon mic. It's not going to be your first choice in the studio. You can get most things done with a large diaphragm condenser like this. Keep it simple. When you're starting out, go for a large diaphragm condenser if you've never used a microphone before and try them out and see how they feel for you. You can put these in front of any source, anything you can imagine, and they will work. You may just have to pull out some of the frequencies in the mid range if you're doing like horns or something like that. Then you could go to something like this. But if you only have one option, get yourself a large diaphragm condenser. Now let's talk about this. One of the things that I see people do that is not the best is they buy themselves a USB large diaphragm condenser. There's nothing wrong with it if you need it to get it done. If it's the only option, use it. But, people send me songs all the time and they'll be like, "Can you mix this?" And they are like, "Yeah, I recorded it with like a Yeti Snowball." And there's only so much that your mixing engineer can do. Like, to an extent, we can be wizards, but if we're spending our whole time trying to save the sound, that's going to be a problem. Get yourself an interface, something simple like a Scarlett 2i2 and a Focusrite, and just get it going with an XLR, large diaphragm condenser, and an interface. That way, your microphone is not trying to do the recording and the transfer from analog to digital and digital to analog. That's not what you want. You want to get yourself an interface, and that's going to make everything a little bit smoother, and you're going to get better quality that way. All right. I think that brings us to a wrap for microphones. Again, today is just the basics. This is how they work. Here's the different types. Here's some stuff that you could use them on. We are going to dive into more technical things as we continue on with the channel. But for now, get yourself a large diaphragm condenser and start recording at home. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. We love you.